Welcome back to another episode of Salesy. Clearly, I am excited to be here and excited to serve you. Before we dive in today's episode, I wanted to give you an opportunity to work with me further. Scale to 5K is my signature group program that helps entrepreneurs like you start hitting consistent 5K months and grow their online business. We focus on the foundations of business, so offers, pricings, products, marketing, sales, how to sign clients, how to raise your prices, and all of those things. This framework has graduated over 100 students in the last 4 years and has actually built my own business to multiple six figures in the first calendar year, and even building these massive launches that you saw this year and last year. If you are someone who you know this is the next step for you and you are ready to see the sales page and apply to the program, go ahead and click into the show notes. It's always linked down there. And ready or not, we're heading into the next episode. Tonya, welcome to the Salesy podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to just dive into everything that we're going to talk about today and kind of what we were jamming about on pre-roll, but we always start in the same place. How did you get started with all of this?
I got started with my business. I would say it was kind of like necessity, but it was also just opportunity, seeing the opportunity. I was working in nonprofit, working in the nonprofit space, and I was working with low-income women, working with women who like life just happened to them. They have been these phenomenal, they're still phenomenal women, but I mean, they had these phenomenal careers and they ended up living in senior housing, shared housing units for low-income women. And I was like, oh, this is what happens if you don't prepare for your financial future. Let me start taking this serious. And so I started learning about finance, started learning about personal finance in particular, and was like, what better way to hold myself accountable than by creating a blog about it. So this is when blogging was really big. I created a blog about it, and then I asked for vacation. I asked my boss if I could go on vacation to London and Paris with my mother and sisters, like a life-changing vacation. First time I had really been abroad in my adulthood. And she gave me such a hard time about the time that I requested. And then told me that I was really lucky that she was giving me this time, and that, most people wouldn't get, 7 days off. And so I decided I'm going to make this a lifestyle. People are getting paid to blog. I'm going to figure out how to get paid to blog. And I did. So I ended up resigning from the 9 to 5 life in 2015 and just focusing on building a financial education platform that worked with women primarily.
I think it's so interesting how, as business owners, we're taught to think about the future, but it's like these high income producing men and women, and like business owners, sometimes they don't think about like retirement and the fact that one day you're not going to work anymore. And like, how do you plan from the future? I remember the first experience I had with that was when I worked for a dog trainer, and his retirement plan was selling the business. And I looked at it because I was like, oh, this business comes with contacts. It like he would still work it until he decided not to work anymore. And then like I got into it and I obviously didn't buy it, but it was just like people are preying on this like miracle to happen to them when it's actually like something you can plan for, and it's not as expensive as some people think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree.
So you now are a three-time founder. You have your financial media entity, you do government contracting, and then you are also investing and speaking and doing all of these things. What would you say is like one of the biggest struggles that someone has building a business, and how have you solved that for yourself, being able to build
I would
multiple?
say the biggest struggle, my apologies.
You're good.
I would say the biggest struggle in building a business has been there's so much information out there. And it's so weird because like my mother and father were military veterans. And so they weren't the most business savvy folks. Like their business, like they had stable military jobs, right? And for me, I didn't know anybody who was a business owner really. I had an aunt who had a business, but it was slightly different. So one of the biggest challenges for me was just knowing what to do. I think for a lot of the beginning of my business, like I was literally throwing stuff on the wall to see what stuck. just like trying to figure out like if I do this, if I do this, if I do this. And I think a lot of people don't really have guidance on like the path to profit when they're starting a business and the path to sustainable profit. It's like, okay, now I've learned how to make money, but is it sustainable to make money this way in a business in a way that sustains the business, that sustains my overhead and sustains my lifestyle? So I would say that is probably one of the biggest challenges I've seen, followed by, you mentioned I'm a three-time founder, right? Followed by you literally can do anything because you own your time. So sometimes you spread yourself too thin because you have more time. Not realizing that and diluting your time, you're not giving things that are really viable the attention that they need and kind of wasting energy on things that might not be as viable.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're seeing more in the online space where it's like they find a company or they found a company and then from there they're like, oh well, I'm going to found a second company, and it's just continuing to split their attention versus like really growing one and then moving to the next one. And if you
Hmm.
are like if you're a trice entrepreneur at that point too, it's like, okay, like make sure you have the stuff in place because things do need time. And while we're in a place where like rapid growth is very tangible, it's also like you have to let time do its job.
Yeah, you really do. I think, and it requires patience to do that, right? It really does require patience to allow time to do its job. And I think that, business owners, one of the things you can give yourself is multiple revenue streams before you rely on your business full time. So I think that a lot of business owners prematurely rely on their business full time, and the business just isn't set up to provide that for them.
I would 100% agree with that. And I think it's also like a pride thing. Like I left my 9 to 5 8 months into starting my business. And I honestly tell people I wish I would have waited a year. I've gotten really lucky where like I do run my business full time. I am salaried, but I also have the opportunity because I don't have kids. I live at home still, save some good money on rent. And it's like I also dog sit on the side so that it's like I can pull a lesser salary and allow the business to be able to feed into itself, which is such a good asset as you're growing it versus trying to be taking from it providing you and still learning business because business is it's a learning curve that I don't think a lot of people realize.
Oh my gosh, it's such a learning curve. And I mean, I agree. And I, I wish I would have started my business like when I have more flexibility. I mean, I'm very transparent about my journey and everything. And I recently decided to go back to a 9 to 5 because of I got a divorce and I have a child now. And starting a business when you have support versus when you are the support are two completely different scenarios.
It is, and I think that's something too that's not commonly talked about as well as even just having secondary support. I think the call for transparency in the online space too is people also want the ability to know that like it sometimes is not an even playing field. Recently I was talking to one of my friends and I was like, there's these founders who come out and they say they grew so rapidly and their business grew rapidly. Then you talk to them and there's these little nuances that they happen to leave out behind the scenes. Like the husband was working full time and providing for them and also working in the company. Or there's been situations where it's like they say they're 0 to 7 figures, but they went and worked for a coach who does high volume sales and they learned how to do sales and then only had to learn how to market themselves or came in with authority. And that's where I think a lot of other people don't realize when it comes to building a business that you're also kind of in your own lane and it's not this even playing field. Everybody starts out with the same skills or even the same resources.
I 100% agree. And I'm glad that you called that out, like how people leave like a lot of the details out of it, because you just can't believe everything you hear online. And I think that as a business owner, sometimes you can get down on yourself. We always say comparison is a thief of joy, right? But it happens. It's natural. The best of us compare ourselves. And I think that sometimes, a business owner, you can find yourself comparing yourself to someone whose scenario is completely different from yours. I know that when I started my business, I had excellent video. I won't say excellent, but I had really good video production. And it was because my ex-husband was in video and film. He was a videographer and an editor. So I literally was living with my videographer and editor and had free video services. So of course my videos were good. But it's like if somebody would have compared themselves to them, like we're not even on the same playing field because I have this tool available to me. I'm not calling my ex-husband a tool, but this resource available to me that others don't. And that was one of the ways that I was able to grow my business as a content creator and as a spokesperson because I had quality content out there for brands to see when they were looking for spokespeople. And so it is important, I think, for those of us who are business owners and have been successful to be transparent about how we got there, as well as for people who are growing to realize that they might not have the same resources.
Yeah, and it's okay if you don't have the same resources or if it takes you a longer timeline or if you have to figure things out. I would be curious because you're someone who came in with like more financial knowledge. How do you feel like that influenced you being able to grow your business and then grow multiple businesses?
I would say that I was less risk averse. I was always calculating what the return on investment was and is, and always kind of like auditing the books to determine if things were valuable or viable. I would say I definitely spent quite a bit of time um reviewing my finances and like instead of just winging it as an entrepreneur, I would say that's one of the biggest things. Like I spent a lot of time reviewing my finances and I was very comfortable and also knew what I didn't know. So bringing in a fractional CFO, bringing in other people who could advise me on certain things that I just knew I wasn't versed on. But I would also say, one of the things we were speaking to was like retirement, right? And thinking about what it looks like to retire. Because of my financial knowledge, I've continued to invest in my future. I have my account set up. I have my IRA set up. I have my retirement accounts. I have my stock account set up that I contribute to, as well as for my son. So I've still been able to grow my finances and for my future, even though I've been an entrepreneur, which sometimes comes with like unstable income and things like that, but I've still been able to grow those assets outside of it. So I would say that's probably the biggest benefit is like I understand the importance of growing my retirement accounts, my investment accounts outside of actual entrepreneurship.
I think that's something people don't really talk about, and it's kind of one of those hushed things about like using your business as a wealth opportunity, not just a money-making opportunity. And that was something like this year I finally set up a retirement account and was like, okay, like how much am I contributing to this so that I am, thinking about the future? And honestly, I think you were in a better position to like think about your finances and look at them because myself included, starting a business, you're just like, oh, I don't know the numbers, like I'll figure it out later. And sometimes it's a reactive behavior of hiring and investing when you're like, well, I'll just figure out the money later versus being like, actually, this is how much I can spend. This is my current budget. This is what's getting me an ROI versus not. Where I think some people just go into it so blindly because they are afraid of it or they have really bad personal financial habits and they think that like building a business is going to solve it for them.
Yeah, and it's not. It'll exacerbate it because it's inconsistent income, and you really do have to understand how to budget on inconsistent income. So and that's one of the challenges. I mean, it comes to the challenges, and that's one of the reasons I decided to go back to the workforce, right? Because I don't think enough people talk about also the like emotional and the actual physical toll the entrepreneurship can take. Like there is so beautiful and so freeing. Like thoroughly enjoyed the past 9 years of building my business. But I wanted to give myself a break as far as like my cortisol levels and just give myself some time from being the primary decision maker and being so close to the finances and everything else. It really is a beautiful opportunity. You learn so much about yourself, but it is important for you to be honest about what it's doing to you and not allow your ego to allow you to stay in something that might not be healthy for you based on where you are in your life.
I think that's such a large conversation too, because we are seeing a lot of people go back to corporate and the messaging like 4 years ago was, if you're all in on your business, you're going to quit your job, you're going to spend all your time doing it. And I don't think that's the case. I remember when I was reading one of Adam Grant's books, and he was talking about the people at Warby Parker literally kept all their jobs until it was like viable for them to quit. And it gave the business a different kind of runway because you're not taking money out to take a salary. What you're doing is you're being able to feed into it. Your basic needs are taken care of, which economic security is a basic need. It's not just food, water, and enough sleep. We live in a world where money is a part of every single day and more
Mm-hmm.
moments than I think most people are conscious to. But it's also just like, I think it's so freeing to have someone like you come in and say, I went back to a 9 to 5 and I still run a successful business.
Yeah, and I'm thankful, and that's the way I've kind of phrased it is for me. When I started my business, I was in a two-income household. I was with my ex-husband and we were in a two-income household. And now I'm back being a two-income household because I have my 9 to 5 income as well as I have my business income coming in. So there's so many ways to do this. And I think that for me, even deciding to go back, it was about a year and a half before I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do this. Because I think that entrepreneurship had become so closely tied with my identity as well. And I had to make the mental shift first, as well as figure out what made the most sense for me as far as returning to the workforce. Like, right? Like, my job is 100% remote. I am doing a task, or like my role is what I enjoy most about my business, which is partnerships and building relationships, what I flourished at as a business owner. And so I look for something that I would be happiest in, and not just something where I'm in the office every day doing menial, mundane work. Like for me, it was still, I want to make sure I'm happy in this transition. But also I want to make sure that I'm bringing additional income into my household.
I like how you mentioned that entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur was a really big part of your identity. Can you kind of talk through how you have shifted that? Because it sounds like you still are entrepreneurial, but it doesn't sound
Yes.
like you fully identify that way anymore as like an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I honestly realize I identify more as a change agent. And however I'm creating that change, whether that is through a traditional 9 to 5, whether that is fully as an entrepreneur, whether that is hybrid as an employee and entrepreneur, I'm focused on creating change and creating impact with the work that I do. But I would say that as an entrepreneur, I did create community as an entrepreneur, right? It's a very different experience. And so a lot of my friends were entrepreneurs. I needed people who understood where I was coming from. I still have my best friend. She's a 9 to 5er. My sister's a 9 to 5er. And I always had them, but I think that it became part of my identity online. People saw me as the founder of My Fab Finance. People saw me as this entrepreneur. I became aspirational for other people who wanted to quit their job. And it was just part of my identity. Like Tonya is the founder of My Fab Finance, and she lives her life by her own terms, being a full-time business owner, but also being a very present mother. And I almost felt like I failed initially when I decided I was going to, go back to the workforce. The first feelings that I grappled with was like, did I failed? And I was trying to reach for this, like this 10 year mark. There's statistics about most people go out of business within their first year, then their 5 years, and the 10 year mark. You're almost like this unicorn at 10 years. I was like, I'm chasing this 10 year, but it was just like, at what cost? Like, what was it costing me to chase this arbitrary number? As a business owner, when I saw things were changing, I saw that I no longer had the passion to show up as the way that I showed up in the past, or to adjust with the upcoming trends. And so it definitely, definitely, definitely has been married to how people see me. But I had to realize how I see myself, and how I see myself is a change agent. And so that was an important reframe that I had to take control of.
The fear of failure and feeling like a failure, I think, is not talked about enough as an entrepreneur, as a human, of being like, this is what I wanted, and there's this milestone that's right here, and there's so many people who haven't gotten to that place, but then being like, I'm changing my mind. It's also really
Hmm.
powerful. I always tell my clients that I'm like, if it served you in another season, that's completely okay. Like it got you to the point where you needed to be, but that doesn't also mean that you need to be in that same place. Like you can't grow in the same place that you've grown. Like you have to get a bigger pot. And it's not, the online space does a really good job of pigeonholing, saying that growth is, working inside your company and investing and doing these things. And it's like, actually, there's a lot of growth paths for entrepreneurs. And I think in the next year, we're going to see a lot of people go more local inside their communities, kind of take this like for-profit business into what's a nonprofit mindset of serving community, serving locally. I think we're going to continue to see people go back to a 9 to 5, which is cool because there's also a lot of opportunity to 1099 with large companies and not be like overemployed, but have opportunities to work with it. But I think like being a business owner isn't for everyone. And it's cool to say, like, I can do both. It's also cool to say, like, I tried this and this wasn't for me. And I like the stability of a job, or I like these types of things because people are so quick to praise entrepreneurs. Then there's also like people who had really long, impressive careers inside of small and big companies. And like you said, are change agents. They're making rapid change inside these companies through being inside of a company.
Absolutely. And I think you said so much there that is valuable, that I think that people who are trying to make the decision about what makes sense for them, like, really acknowledge what season you're in. I think the season statement is so important because for me, like, my season was different as a married woman with no children versus a single mother with a child. And the question that you always have to ask yourself is, like, does it serve me in the season? And if so, or at what cost am I holding on to this in this particular season in my life? And I think that entrepreneurs, we bring so much value to the world and to workplaces. I used to joke before I became an entrepreneur. I worked a nonprofit, which was entrepreneurial boot camp, basically, because you are always working. Like, for the most part, there's a lack of resources, and you're wearing multiple hats and fulfilling multiple tasks within that organization. But that's the same as an entrepreneur. Like, it was almost hard to do my resume because I was like, I can do so much because of the business that I built. I'm good at sales. I'm good at branding. I'm good at communications. I'm good at sales funnels. I'm good at marketing and buyer personas. I'm good at building relationships and nurturing leads. I'm good at customer success. There's literally so much that I was good at because of what I've done for the past 9 years. So I think that as you build your business, always build your business and what the possible outcomes could look like. Possible outcome could be that you sell it. It could be that you retire from it, or it could be that you transition back into the workspace or the workplace. And with all those in mind, get what you need out of your business and do what you need to do in your business so that you're successful in all of them, or any of them.
I like that you say like it could be transitioning back to a 9 to 5 and just releasing the shame too. I talked to a past client recently and she was like, I finally found like my dream job and I'm making the money I want and I have spare time and I just feel guilty that I'm not like running my business and doing these things. And I was like, a business is a privilege, it's not a requirement. And like you can decide if it's not for you. It's also really freeing to know that like what you're doing right now is turning into tangible skills. I know when I have, I've had those moments too where I've like looked around and been like, I could, do the whole 9 to 5 in business. For me, it doesn't work, but that's also because I like to travel and it's hard to work remotely when you're halfway across the world and you have less control of your schedule. But for me, it was like, oh, I come in with so many more skills, like you mentioned, and I come in more well rounded. And the interesting thing is that like I don't think a lot of people realize that you could actually get a better job because you were a business owner and you learned all these
Yes.
things than before you even started your business.
Yes, I would say that if I had to do it all over again, I'd still do it the same way that I did it. And I'd say that because, for some people, you mentioned that for some, like, building a business is a privilege, but for me, it was almost a necessity. The career track that I was on and the organization that I was with, I didn't see them promoting me or paying me well. And going and starting my business, I made more money than I ever would have, working in the private for a 9 to 5. My business generated over $3 million over the life of the business. And so I would have never done that working for a 9 to 5. But then also re-entering the workspace, I was able to re-enter at the C-suite. And when I left the workplace, I was in a very junior role, even though I had my master's degree. And so I do think that for me, that time away and building my own thing gave me more confidence. But it also allowed me to build certain skill sets that are valued at this level of the corporate at the level of the corporate playing field, such as I've managed people. At the height of my business, I had 12 people that I managed. I've managed payroll. I've done all these other things. Um, and I think that it was necessary for me to go get that experience from my own thing, because I don't know if someone, especially me being a Black woman, I don't know if someone would have given me that experience in the workplace. So for me, it was out of necessity. And like I said, I do it like that again.
Yeah. I do like the fact that you do call out being a Black woman because that is something like I obviously have not had that lived in experience. I'm white, we're middle class. I've never had anybody ask if I was a diversity hire, but that is something that in the workplace too, being really mindful that sometimes people are playing a diversity game, but they're not playing it in a way that is giving everybody an equal opportunity. Where as a business owner, you learn how to advocate for yourself and you learn and really, how I think for me, what I think is really cool, I serve clients of color as well. And seeing them get really confident and take up a lot of space and own their skills and come in and be a C-suite position is just really cool too, because then it's like, oh, like you said, you're a change agent, but like things are actually changing.
Yeah. The confidence that I got from being a business owner, like, life changing, right? Like, just being able to believe in myself in ways that I don't think I ever would have learned to had I not trusted myself to build something amazing and to sustain myself. And I needed to do it in order to become a more confident woman and leader. Um, and because you literally there's very little things you could tell me that I could do now. Like, honestly, I'm just kind of like, even when I went to interview and I told them, I was like, this is the first interview I've had in, when was the last time I interviewed? Was in 2013. So 11 years. It was like the first interview I had in 11 years. And I was so confident in it because public speaking is something that I do as a business owner. You're constantly selling yourself, and an interview is just selling yourself at the end of the day. And your skill sets and what you know how to do. But if you have any type of agency element to your business, or if you're selling, your the outcomes that you create, you're used to selling yourself. And so I am so confident because of it. And I would honestly encourage people to pursue entrepreneurship as a way of building their confidence and pushing them and pushing their boundaries and pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone, because you have to. In order to be successful, you have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone as an entrepreneur.
I would agree with that. When I just finished backpacking through Europe for 7 weeks, it was about 3 weeks ago. And when I originally told people, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Europe for like I thought it was 6 weeks, and then I counted and it was actually seven. People were like, how do you like do that? Like, how are you okay? Because it was solo travel, but you're never really by yourself unless you want to be. And I
Hmm.
just there were so many people who were like, this is my first trip, I've never done anything like this. And I was like, I built a business from $200 in my dad's house, like in his basement, literally, and then moved into my own office. I'm like, nothing can be harder than those moments of owning a business. Or I came in 6 months prior to COVID. And so, like, even just, going through this experience of I flew home from Vegas, I saw my grandma Monday, and then the following Monday, everybody's getting sent home from work. My dad's home full time, people are getting laid off. There's this rush inside the online space. And it's just like, once you are so confident in what you do and how you do it and who you can help, like you said, there's really few things that I couldn't do. I know there's things I don't want to do, but
Yeah.
there's like someone tells me like, oh, you can't do that. I'm like, I have a figure it out muscle. Like I will figure it out and then make a decision if that's something I want to do. But like the word can't doesn't exist in most entrepreneurs' minds anymore, because it's like, well, tell me I can't do that and I'll just show you how I did it.
Right. And that's the thing. I remember when I was starting my business, my mom had never seen me do anything like that before. So she was like, "What is it? How is it? I don't know." Like, "Oh, just focus on your studies." And then when I was ready to quit my job, I started my business 2013. I resigned from my 9 to 5 2015. My mom was my biggest advocate because she saw me do it. And she was like, "I've seen you." Like, by that time, I'd been on a magazine cover. I had secured writing opportunities. I was writing for different publications. I was coaching. it was just blowing up. And she was just like, quit. I don't like, I believe in you at this point because I have proven to her and proven to myself. And one of the things she told me, she was like, you have a master's degree. You can go back. Like, jobs are going to be there. Jobs are going to be there. Go try it out. You've proven this much so far. Go try it out. And I'm really happy. I'm so happy that I did. I really am. And there, like I said, there are still elements of my business that will continue to do. We have a government contracting arm, and I enjoy subcontracting. I don't enjoy prime contracting. So we have relationships where if someone has project management and they want to bring us in on a contract, we're ready to mobilize, and I have my team ready to mobilize. We still do financial education. We still work with our brand partners. Right now, we're finishing a partnership with Rocket Mortgage, for example. And then I still provide coaching services. I'm taking some time off from doing one-on-one coaching, but we'll be doing that after I get acclimated back into my new life and what it looks like, having a 9 to 5 job, as well as I still do speaking engagements. The thing that was important for me when I was interviewing for this job was communicating to them that I still want to operate elements of my business and I'm 100% remote. So I can travel to, different colleges, universities when I'm speaking, or I'm teaching classes at the City University of New York, launching their financial literacy certificate program. And I can travel and do that because this job is understanding that I also have this other element of my life. So I'm really happy it just continues to align with what I believe in: design your life and design what makes sense to you. Like for me, I can't travel as much because I have a son who's in kindergarten and he can't miss days of school. And I'm definitely not a homeschool mom. So we're here. So I might as well figure out what makes the most sense and maximize based on where we are. And that is a beautiful thing. I hope that if anybody is I think not if anybody is listening to this, but I hope that for those listening, just remember that you can design your life to look like how it best serves you in whatever season you're in, whether that's 100% entrepreneurship, whether that's hybrid, whatever it is, whether that's consulting, part-time entrepreneurship. You can design your life to look like what you need it to look like for your happiness.
And you actually have a quiz that talks about life alignment. Can you talk about the quiz?
Yeah, so a lot of times we are making decisions from a place that is not in alignment, but what we think is expected of us. And so I created the My Aligned Life Quiz, which helps you just kind of walk through some questions to figure out how aligned you are with the ideal version of yourself and the ideal and the true version of yourself and the life that you want to live. And so it's, no quiz can tell you like everything about yourself, but it gives you a good idea. And I think it has some questions in there that help you, I, I guess, reflect. I would say that reflect on, how does this feel for me? What does this say about me? What am I saying to myself about me? So yeah, that's myalignedlifequiz.com.
Yeah, and that's like a really good place to think about the lens you're going through. I think, like you said, a lot of people are just making decisions versus I always tell my clients, like, what you do now is going to influence the future, but then it's also making that decision. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday and I was like, well, what does you in 5 years look like? And I would make the decision if I knew what I was going to be doing in 5 years and how I wanted to feel. You also have the mini private podcast about getting paid to be yourself. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I have so what has been the most I would say impactful decision I made in my business was deciding to be a subject matter expert. And by being a subject matter expert, that is different from an influencer. I still work with brands, but I am brought in by companies, corporations, associations, brands for consulting opportunities, for speaking opportunities, for partnerships, for spokesperson, because I've become an expert in financial education. And anyone can become a subject matter expert as long as like they're interested, they have knowledge in the space, they're operating in the space. And so in You Inc., I teach people how to get paid to be themselves for a living. And that is taking your subject matter expertise, whether you are a dental hygienist, whether you are a phlebotomist, or whether you are an interior designer or financial educator. How do you take your knowledge and position yourself in a way that people are calling you for advising services, for spokesperson opportunities related to your field? And how do you stand out from the crowd? So I created that podcast, You Inc., specifically for that, for people who are like, I know I'm brilliant. I know my stuff. I know the world needs to see me, or my industry needs to see me, and I want to be at the top of it. How do I do that? I walk through it in U Ink, which is basically a mini audio course.
Yeah, and I think being a subject matter expert is where a lot of people are trending towards, not because it's trendy, but because there's a very big difference between being a subject matter expert and being an influencer. And if you're someone who has spent a lot of time learning something and crafting it, I do encourage you to go listen to the podcast. I would love to end this podcast on maybe one or two lessons that you feel like you have learned in this season, kind of transitioning out of your business full time and moving to a 9 to 5, and maybe somebody needs to hear those lessons.
Yeah, I would say the first one is be okay with releasing. I think that going through a divorce, I was trying to hold on to so many elements of my life that I had when I was married, that it cost me a lot by just trying to hold on to it instead of just being willing to release. And so be willing to release things that aren't serving you in the next season and acknowledge the season that you're in. And then the second one I would say is it's not over until you start trying. One thing I would always ask myself, whether it's as an entrepreneur, whether it's a full-time employee, whatever it is if I feel like I want to give up, I ask myself, have you done everything that you could do? And the answer was always no. And usually that meant, okay, go pull out that notebook and review the notes you took at that conference that you went to, or that coaching session that you had, or that class you took online, and implement at least 3 things from that. Like, taking action is so powerful. And usually we feel like we're not making progress because we haven't done everything that we could do, or we haven't taken action. So I would say that is my thing. It is not over until you stop trying.
Yeah, and that I think coming back to like it's not over and have you done everything? Because I think we're quick to say, well, I've done it, but it's like, have you done literally everything? And then at that point you can say, okay, maybe I
The
need to
answer is almost
differently.
always no. It's almost always no. Like, now I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't want to do everything. And that's a whole different conversation, right? For me, that was a conversation about, if you don't want to do everything, girl, you need to just go ahead and look at your other options then. But like, if you really haven't done it and you're up to it, then start doing.
Exactly. If they loved this episode and they want to connect with you further, where do they connect with you?
I am most active on Threads. I love Threads. I love the bonuses. I love it. So you can find me at Tonya, Tonya.Rapley on Threads. I'm also on Instagram as Tonya.Rapley, and LinkedIn. I'm connected with more folks on LinkedIn. That's Tonya with the O, TonyaRapley.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan.
If you have loved today's episode, make sure that you rate and review the Salesy podcast on whatever your preferred platform is. Rating and reviews does help us push out to more people, get more listeners, and be able to serve you deeper. If you haven't, go ahead and check out the show notes. We have everything linked down there. And if you are listening to this episode and you love it, go ahead and screenshot it, share it on Instagram, and tag me. Before we leave today, I want to remind you that Scale to 5K is still open for enrollment. This is a signature group program focusing on laying your business foundations, helping you hit 5K cash months consistently, so over 6 and 12 months, and being able to build your online business. This has graduated over 100 students, and this framework is near and dear to my heart because it actually helped me make my own first 5K in my business and helped me rebuild my business after leaving last year. So if you are called and ready, go ahead, click down into the show notes. The sales page is linked down there, and I will see you on another episode of Salesy.